Salida, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim and welcome to the Sounds German review of the new Saltatio Mortis album Brot und Spiele. Saltatio Mortis was a German folk rock band and they have released music since the beginning of the 2000s. It took quite a few years until they reached mainstream success, but with a crowd that was into this medieval kind of rock, they were a pretty big hit long before. I started listening to them myself around 2007 or 2008 with the albums Des Königs Henker and later Aus der Asche. Both really neat albums that mix medieval instruments with modern rock and lyrics that are basically little, sometimes pretty grim fairy tales. And then 2015 came around and the band released Circus Zeitgeist, an absolutely dreadful album. One of the few albums I went so far to say I hated them. The medieval aspect was pushed back hard. Instead, we get phrase-mongering and pathos in the disguise of contemporary political comment, but not really saying anything of value, let alone any depth. It was a fucking dumb album that utilized politics in an absolutely shameful way, had basically only one decent track, and wasn't even above insulting and attacking longtime fans who voiced their unhappiness with the stylistic changes the band had made. So here we are now with their latest album Brot und Spiele, where the band basically had the choice between continuing down the path Circus Zeitgeist walked on or pulling the emergency brake and going back to their roots. And in the most bizarre way imaginable, Saltatio Mortis actually did both. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, let's start at the beginning. Ein Stück Unsterblichkeit serves as the almost 90-second long intro track and is mostly instrumental until the oh chorus kicks in, which you can find multiple times on this album. For example, right away in the first real track Große Träume, a song looking back at how the band started and had these big dreams, sort of pushy, good mood song to open the album on. But this track also showcases right away a sort of nasty bait and switch Saltatio Mortis pull on almost every track on this album. Because for many tracks you will find medieval horns or bagpipes or something like that in the intro, usually also in the hook. Quite subdued there, but still present enough to stick out. But that's pretty much it in terms of medieval instrumentation to be found on this album. The rest is this really soft, simple, just straight up modern rock. E-guitars, drums, that's basically it. Something that I saw already beginning on Circus Zeitgeist, and it seems like they've only doubled down with that on here, like they are removing the medieval elements more and more. The aforementioned Große Träume, for example, sounded like the most toothless version of a typical Deutschrock song I have ever heard. One or two tracks have these very slight punk influences to them, and the eponymous track goes a bit more into a Neue Deutsche Härte direction with really meaty, heavy guitar riffs, but overall it's incredibly unimpressive music-wise. The compositions are dirt simple and not even that catchy to make up for it. The medieval instruments were also a strong point because Saltatio Mortis had a huge variety of them at their disposal. One could of course argue that the bagpipes were the most prominent ones being used, but still, the arsenal was there. But on Brot und Spiele it just feels absolutely token, almost as if they put bagpipes or flutes that sound pretty much alike into the beginning and the hook of most songs just so they can deflect criticism of removing the medieval elements from their music. And this is also why I categorized this album as rock and not folk rock or anything else, because it simply isn't anymore. Most of the time you get pretty thin, quite clean electric guitar riffs and mid-tempo drumming going on in the background, with at least the bass drum getting a bit more presence here and there. Then you get of course the more emotional, slow-paced tracks, which are Spur des Lebens and Träume aus Eis on this album, with the first being an piano-heavy track that leads into a soft rock crescendo, and the latter just being simply soft rock. And Nie wieder Alkohol and Mittelalter both both fill the role of the upbeat, slightly comedic track that describes how they are too old to drink and party anymore. Yada yada yada, we have been there 1,000 times already. Given the composition style on this album, I also have to admit, naming one track Middle Ages sort of feels like them taking the piss here though. And then there are the political tracks, because of course there are. Saltatio Mortis really tried their damnedest this time around to create this us against them mentality, but oftentimes don't even dare to name their targets. I mean, it's very heavily implied. Anyone with even a base knowledge of the current political landscape here will know what's up, but except for one track, they just sort of try to veil it, which I don't understand because it's still so damn obvious. It just reeks of a very strange kind of cowardice. And just let it sink in that Kollega and Farid Bang, two people who make this super primitive kind of rap, didn't shy away from calling out right-wing politicians by name. Now, these political tracks follow the same structure I described before in terms of composition. You get some sort of medieval instruments for the intro and the hook, but then it devolves into this really simplistic kind of rock. I find the compositions on this album already pretty damn dull and boring, and I don't know if I ever called an album this before, completely unimaginative. So it's not that the lyrics of the political tracks turn this into a bad album, because it's that already, but they definitely make it even worse. Dorn im Ohr is the first track of this kind on this album, and it's probably one of the worst too. It's all about how Saltatio Mortis are this thorn in your ear and that they won't shut up about political issues even if people tell them to, and okay, listen. If people tell you to shut up, it's probably because you apparently aren't able to tackle complex political topics in a way they deserve or are entertaining. While I don't actively seek out political music, I stumbled over it, of course. And if it's well done, it can be entertaining and carry an important message. Like for example Antilopengang with their last album, or to go simply back a few decades even, Die Ärzte. Or as an example outside of Germany, Kendrick Lamar's album To Pimp a Butterfly, which was highly political and a great album in its own right. Saltatio Mortis, meanwhile, only dishes out hollow statements and phrase-mongering. And no, you are not a thorn in someone's ear, like it needs Saltatio Mortis to remind us of the political landscape. Listen, if someone really dislikes your music or political stance here, they just won't listen to the damn album. They will hear this track once and then never again. You are not a thorn in anyone's ear with this. You are literally preaching to the choir here, people. Saltatio Mortis seems to think that delivering platitudes on the lyrical level of "Rap fuck Nazis" is good enough. And it probably is to find success, I will be completely honest here, but that alone certainly doesn't make for good lyrics or good music. Of course, it enables you to deflect any criticism as just Nazis being salty, and given they were willing to attack their own longtime fans on their last album, I wouldn't even put it past them anymore. In the song Besorgter Bürger, they seem to finally find their balls and just flat out call these people assholes and fascists, only to then pronounce that hate and violence are not an option for anyone. It's like listening to a first semester politics student with a split personality. They accuse what they perceive as their political opponents of using language of the Third Reich, which I presume refers to the term Lügenpresse, the lying press in English. Now, if I'm right with this assumption, let me tell you, the term was used long before the Nazis came into power here, and with the eponymous track Brot und Spiele, they basically made a whole song about how the media is used for manipulation of the masses. If Saltatio Mortis had the lyrical skill to actually talk about these very complex political issues we have right now, this could have saved the album. But instead they kept trotting down the path they started with Circus Zeitgeist, with this brutal amount of phrase-mongering without actually saying anything, let alone anything of value. And if people tell you to shut up about political issues and go back to your old style, then maybe that is because you were actually good at that. Because, good lord, you suck when it comes to political tracks. You just suck. Hell, they even showcase on this album with the track Brunhild that they still kinda have it. Setting the composition aside here, this is probably the best track of the album because it delivers what made Saltatio Mortis big and popular in the first place: mythical tales and folklore stories. But of course there is the second disc. Now, normally I only cover these in one paragraph and that's basically it, just a side note to inform you what is on there, because my focus is the experience you get with the basic, normal edition of an album. But the second disc of Brot und Spiele deserves special attention. I honestly couldn't believe my ears when the first track of the second disc started, which gives you 13 additional songs and basically doubles the playtime. And this second disc, which you can get only in the special edition if you buy physical, is filled with medieval songs. Saltatio Mortis went back to the roots here with acoustic medieval instruments, tales about the devil or Heimdall, lyrics in Latin and even one English track. What can I say here? It's good. It's fun to listen to, an enjoyable medieval romp for about 45 minutes. Bagpipes and flutes and horns and hand drums and acoustic guitars and percussions, it all comes together here. Hiding this behind the second disc just feels like adding insult to injury, because I could see many longtime fans wanting this, but not the main album. But if you want to buy physical, you will have to get the album. It just feels like very deliberate milking, because the second disc can stand on its own just fine. Sure, it's very iterative of the genre, but it shows at least some strengths of the band, and if you like this kind of music, it's still a pretty good disc. Not groundbreaking, but entertaining and fun to listen to. And that they basically hit that behind the special edition, man, that's just mean and reminds me of the worst DLC practices we have seen with video games in the past years. If anything, you should just grab these tracks via digital means and ignore the main disc completely. So, as a conclusion, Brot und Spiele is a half-decent album, meaning the decent half is the second disc. The main album is just dreadful. Empty platitudes and phrase-mongering about complex topics and uninspired, boring rock compositions without any bite to them make this the worst output of this band to date. If you simply want to bellow along against right-wing people, just want to have your own point of view reaffirmed in the most bland way possible, go ahead and grab this. But if you want some good music, you should probably stay away. The second disc is worth a purchase if you dig medieval style music, and it is fun and entertaining and lighthearted, but it's certainly not worth ponying up the cash for the main album, because the main album is bad, and if I were to give out numbers for my reviews, this would be a 0. A big, fat, round circle of failure. And I hope Saltatio Mortis either get a capable songwriter or never ever attempt to make political music again. So I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you did, please leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you didn't like it, we have a button for that too. And if you have listened to this album, feel free to tell me in the comments what you thought about it. And if you want at least one weekly music review from an artist or band you probably never heard about before, just subscribe to the channel. You can also follow Sounds German on Facebook or Twitter. I do usually post daily new music videos on there from all kinds of artists. I hope to see you again next time. Have a nice day. Salida!